good daughter-in-law to me, but I can't let you come with me any further.
But why? Don't you want me to come with you?
There's nothing for you with me. If you come with me, you'll have to live as a poor widow for the rest of your life.
But what other life would I have? I am a poor widow, and I belong with you.
But if you go back to your people, you don't have to be. You could get married again.
But then what would happen to you? I am young and strong. I can take care of us.
But don't you want to be with your people?
No, I'm staying with you. You are my people now.
Just a couple of side notes on the story. Also, if you've been paying attention to your bulletin, which I hope you have, or your program, I'm not Jim, and from now on, I'm not going to introduce myself as not Jim, because I think as identifying ourselves by what we aren't is not a good way to live our lives. So, I'm Blake. A couple of side notes from reading for today's sermon. A couple of things I realized is that Ruth and Naomi were on a journey to Bethlehem. Yes, a journey to Bethlehem. And also, before Boaz was married, he was ruthless. Those are just two side notes. If you don't get it, you'll get it eventually. And if you don't, it's okay. It's totally fine. Let's have another word of prayer together this morning. God, thank you so much for being in this space with us. I pray that if there is a heart needing healing, that you would heal it. If there is a soul that is lonely, that you would draw close to it. We thank you for the gifts that you give us, and we praise you for the ways that you work in people today and people that we read about, and that you have not left us to ourselves. Amen. There's something universal about belonging, and it's come up in sermons before. The greatest human longing is belonging. The biggest thing that we want is to belong to something. And I was just reading this morning in the brochure for Big Lake Youth Camp for this summer, and the theme is "You Belong." And Pastor Les starts there's a paragraph in the beginning. He talks about how so much of our lives we spend trying to become the person who would belong. You're hanging out with a certain class of people or a certain group of people, so you start dressing a certain way, you start saying certain things. Maybe you have different kinds of shoes. Like I'm wearing Vans. My brother thinks Vans are awesome, so I want him to think I'm awesome, so I got Vans. My brother's 15, he's in high school, so he knows what's cool, right? But there's this idea that if we can be a part of this certain group, we will just fit in. But the thing at Big Lake for this summer, the theme is you belong. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. You don't have to put on the perfect clothes or the right clothes or whatever. Like you can come as you are, with the clothes on your back and the shoes on your feet, or your bare feet or your sandals, whatever. Just come as you are, and you belong how you are. And that's kind of like what we want to have a sense of here in our church, in our family, is you come as you are, and you belong. Whether you put on a tie or not. I chose a tie today. It's nice. It has flowers. It's uncomfortable, too, and I can't breathe very well. But somehow, that's not because I think if I wear this, I will belong, by the way. Just throwing that in there. But there's this idea in our culture that if we can just become a member at this place, then we can be treated like we belong. One story is, a couple weeks ago, my sister got married. Woo, that was really exciting. And it really was. And on the way back, I had a screw in the back tire of my car. I'm driving down the road and I hear this thump, 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 thump. I'm like, oh, that can't be good. Go back. Sure enough, I drive into Les Schwab. The tires on my car are not from Les Schwab. And you know the Les Schwab warranty is good if you have Les Schwab tires, and if you get your tires serviced or your car serviced at Les Schwab, you get them rotated every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, and your alignment's done, you have a good warranty. Les Schwab is good, not necessarily because their tires are the best, which some people say they are, I'm not sure, but they're so good because of their warranty. You can have a flat and they'll fix it for free. So I show up there thinking, all right, I don't belong here. My tires aren't from here. It's like, okay, what are you going to charge me to fix my tire? I'm not a member here. And they're like, yeah, we can fix that for you. It'll be $14. I'm like, of course. And like, you can pay at the end. So here I am, like, the tires on my car, I think I got them online anyway, actually. And so they're not Les Schwab tires. I would think if I had Les Schwab, they would treat me like I belong. They'd say, here, sit by the popcorn machine. Have your own popcorn. Sit over here by the big screen TV and watch the Olympics or whatever. I don't know. And so I'm sitting there and waiting. All right, I was going to have to pay $14, and that's okay. It's really not the end of the world. And then they come back and they say, your car's done, your tire's good, no charge. Wait a minute. But I'm not part of the family, though. Like, I'm not part of the Les Schwab family or the brotherhood here. And thank you. $14 really isn't a big deal, right? But that's just an illustration where you think, okay, you have to belong, you have to be the member in order to get treated well. Ruth was kind of an outsider. She was from Moab. She was a Moabite woman, and she married a son of Elimelech and Naomi. So we're going to go through the book of Ruth pretty quickly, actually. I hope it's pretty quickly. It might turn into really long, though. So there was a famine in Bethlehem where Elimelech and Naomi were from. So the two and their sons move away, they sojourn, they travel, and sojourn means to it's not really wander, but it's kind of with the intention of coming back someday. So they're going, and in verse 3 we read, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her two sons. These two sons find Moabite women, and they get married, of course. And which is a really great idea, right, Dwayne? It's a great idea to get married. Yeah. Dwayne is getting married this summer, and so am I, to different people. It's like, how do I phrase this? Dwayne and I are getting married this summer. It's a great decision, and two very wonderful young women that Caitlin, wonderful, and Jen is, of course, absolutely wonderful. And I'm sad she's not here today. She's on call at the hospital in Portland. We'll tell her, thank you, yes. But it's a great idea. You know, you move somewhere, you find a spouse, you get married, and then an awful thing happens. These two sons, Naomi's two sons, they end up dying too. And so Naomi has these two daughters-in-law, and she's not really stuck with them because it seems like they probably had a pretty good relationship. But Naomi tells Ruth and she tells Orpah. She says, as you saw here, Addie telling to Kara, look, just go back to your homes. You have nothing for me. You're just going to become an old widow. Go back home. And Ruth is committed to staying with her. And she's so committed that she says, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your God will be my God. And the God that she was choosing to serve was the one that promised life, promised eternal life, and promised salvation and forgiveness. And one of the gods, there were many gods for the Moabites, but one of the gods was Kodesh, I believe is the name. And one of the things that you would have to do is you would have to appease this god. And I don't know if there were sacrifices that you had to make, but there were things that you had to do to belong to this family, right? And the God that Naomi served was one that you choose to follow, you choose to obey, and you choose to trust. And you didn't really have to prove that by killing your children, which is kind of what the other gods would require. But, so we continue the story. Ruth ends up in this field, and she's gleaning, picking up the grain from behind the harvesters. And Boaz comes over, and he's like, wait a minute, who is this young woman? And they tell him, oh, she's the Moabite woman. She was married to the son of Elimelech who died, and she came here with Naomi. And he says, okay, well, what I want you to do then, she is so dedicated here, and she's so committed to the family, that I want you to let her glean behind you. And I'll take it another step. Don't just let her glean, but let her take from the sheaves of grain that you pick and pile up. And then what ends up happening is she takes sort of a liking to this Boaz, and she ends up declaring that to him by staying at his feet in chapters 3 and 4 of Ruth. In fact, I would encourage you this afternoon. It's only 4 chapters. Go through it, check it out. It's really easy. It's a narrative. The only genealogies are at the very end, and it's only like 6 generations, so it's pretty easy read. Boaz ends up accepting her and saying, I would like to redeem you from your current condition, and yet there is someone else who has the place in front of me. And this is called the kinsman redeemer. When a woman and a man were married, if the man died, the woman was left with essentially nothing, and the closest of kin, the closest of family to the man who died, would then marry her and also buy the land that belonged to them. So that the land, part of the purpose was so that the land could stay in the family. So Boaz volunteers. He says, look, I'll do that for you. I see that you are a committed woman. You are following our God. You are committed to Naomi, and you have blessed Naomi by staying with her to provide for her in that long journey here. And so he offers to be her kinsman redeemer. And then he finds out that there is one other who is actually closer to her. So he goes to the gates of the city. And let me see here. He goes away, and Naomi and Ruth are talking. And Naomi says to Ruth, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. And in chapter 4, verse 1, we read, now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer, the kinsman Redeemer, the one who is the closest to her husband, which it doesn't say exactly who, but it was either Mahlon or Chilion, or Chilion. The kinsman Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here, come together, because I need some witnesses, and I need some trustworthy, legitimate witnesses here. So they sit down, and then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here. We're in verse 4 of chapter 4. Buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Okay, now Boaz is like, great, but not great, because because with the land goes Ruth, and there's something there, and I won't ever find out because he's going to buy the land now. Wait a second. So he said, I will redeem it. And Boaz said, well, the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So one of them takes off their shoe and gives it to the other. This is how you seal the deal, and this is their contract. And they go on. They are witnesses to what the Lord has done there that day. There are more details, and the more that we read it, the more we find. A couple of things that I still don't know is who wrote Ruth, and why then did the person who wrote Ruth, after Naomi said, I am not Naomi, I am Mara, why did they not continue calling her Mara? Like she said, I am not, what does Naomi means? Pleasant, that's right. I am not pleasant anymore, I am bitter. She says, call me this. And yet the author somehow has either fond memories or had heard the story and wrote that no, it wasn't this bitter woman, it was actually still this pleasant woman. So why did she not change the name? And how old is Ruth? And what was her Moabite family like? And also, what about the law? Like the law of Israel was if your husband dies, you marry his brother or his cousin or whoever was the closest to him. You marry that person. But what about the Moabite law? I don't know what's going on there. If she was to go back, would she be welcomed back at all? Would she have to earn her way back? Would it be provided because that was the agreement? I don't know these things. And also, how old is she? How old is Ruth? Because we kind of get this idea that she was a young woman because they say that she had no children. And also when Boaz saw her in the field, he said, who is that young woman? Or who is that girl? Or who is that maid? Is the word that they use. And so I still have these questions about what's going on here. But in this story, we find that there is great redemption for Ruth, for Naomi, and for Boaz. And I wonder, because we try to come up with equations, or maybe not we, but there are groups of religious people. If you pray this prayer enough times, this person will be healed. If you say this way, if you use this version of the Bible, this will happen. Like if you say and do things in a particular way, particular things will happen. And so that kind of influences my thought here. And my thought is that Ruth's commitment to obey and follow the God of Israel, and her commitment to obey and follow where Naomi chose to go, is a testimony to us in our lives of the value of commitment, obedience, and following. And it's a huge risk because we like to know what's going to happen. If I get my gallbladder taken out, I will learn how to play the guitar. Wait, that's not the case. But what can we learn then from the obedience, the commitment, and the willingness to follow and trust that Ruth had in her lifetime? This is a story of one person, particularly Ruth, being redeemed, the price being paid for her, the price that she couldn't have come up with on her own to buy this field and to keep it. Who else has paid a price that others could not have afforded? Have you ever had a debt paid for you? Like a real debt, like your school loans depending on who you voted for or who you vote for, there are some people who have in the past and maybe currently who are promising to have your school loans paid for. Someone has to pay for that. That's the other thing. Someone has to pay for that. And until we grasp the seriousness of what we are owing to something or someone, we can't really value the debt that is paid for us. So, I'm thinking of the life, the death, and the resurrection of Christ, and how that fulfilled the purchase of ourselves, for not only eternity in heaven, but forgiveness of our sins, and the cleansing of our unrighteousness, the repairing of a relationship, and the restoring of a commitment to Him. He paid all those prices so we don't have to. And yet we go around trying to find a way to do the right thing, to fit in, to become the right person, to belong. And if ever there is any sense, whether it's accurate or perceived or misunderstood, that we, for some reason, don't belong, we're so quick to leave that place. The price has been paid. It is not what you do that gets you there. It's what's been done for you that gets you there. How many of you have heard that your whole lives? How many of you have heard that it's not what you do, it's what's been done for you? How many of you have heard that at least 4 times in your life? How many of you have heard that once in your life? All your hands should go up because I just said it. All right, you've heard it at least once in your life. It's not what you do that gets you there. It gets you places here, right? Here on earth, it gets you places. You build something well, you get asked back to come build it again. You teach students well, you get hired on the next year. Or you buy into the program and you really support it, and you're just either the best at it or you're good enough, whatever. But that doesn't do anything eternally for us. It gains acceptance and approval here. But our acceptance and our approval has already been paid and is already taken care of. Another thing that I want to challenge you with today, as well as myself here, pull out your comment cards or connection card. If your comments are positive, it's a comment card. Otherwise, it's a connection card. We want to see your face if you have a comment, so come see us. This week, I choose to let God's blessings pass human barriers by, and especially I want to focus on the first one. Showing God's love to someone I don't understand. Typically we can have tensions or choose to dislike somebody, and a lot of times it comes down to not understanding them. That's certainly not all the times. You can know someone well and still not like them. Which is really not recommended for your health and for your heart, but it's possible. But showing God's love to someone that we don't understand fully. Boaz chose to do that to Ruth, and Ruth chose to do that to Naomi, and let's choose to do that to each other this week, or to others that maybe aren't here this week. Choose to do something kind or show God's love to someone that we don't understand. I'd like you to think about that as we are singing this song and as the deacons now pick up our offering, which is for our local church budget. Thank you.